Welcome to Jerry Recaps. Today we will be continuing part 5 of this manhwa. The story continues. A large snake approaches. It was the subterranean snake. It had appeared a few times near the subway entrance. It was a monster that could swallow a monster in one bite, currently making it the hardest monster to hunt. And right now, Songchan was running with all his might away from that subterranean snake. His dexterity stat was pretty high, relative to his other stats, but the subterranean snake was much faster than Songchan. It closed the distance between them in an instant, making Songchan scream. Songchan remembered the deal that they made with YuWon. You are telling me this is a good deal? Many thoughts flashed in Songchan's mind. He remembered the time when they made the deal. YuWon stared at Songchan and asked, "You didn't hurt your legs, right?" "Yes, they're fine." "Alright then." YuWon nodded his head towards the dungeon, and said Songchan and Yuan to run towards the dungeon. Now he could only repent of his decision. "Save me!" The snake was right behind Songchan. He was giving his full to running away from the snake. The snake's mouth was opened wide. YuWon jumped in the air and charged toward the snake. A knife flew inside the snake's open mouth. It blinked a few times, then the subterranean snake collapsed on its side. The subterranean snake's blood splattered everywhere. YuWon jumped into the air. A 2-meter-tall, muscular red lizard opened its jaws wide for YuWon. A long knife glowed blue. The moment YuWon and the red lizard came into contact, a red line was drawn across the lizard's body. He sliced it apart from its head to its torso. With minimal force, YuWon killed the red lizard. An essence fell on the floor. Songchan looked behind at the monsters that were chasing him. Already that many. This hunting speed is incredible. If he's been hunting like this the entire time, how much essence does YuWon have? In an instant, a few monsters began spurting blood everywhere. Starting with the subterranean snake, monsters unknown to him started dropping dead one at a time. Essence continuously fell to the floor. If he had hunted outside, he might have maybe gotten 1 essence after killing 15 monsters. Was it because it was a different hunting ground? Compared to zombies or moss spiders, the subterranean snakes, red lizards, and other monsters that YuWon was hunting right now had a much higher drop rate. Songchan quickly picked up the essence that was rolling around. In just the last 2 hours, they managed to obtain over 50 essences. 5 essences from 15 monsters. The drop rate is significantly higher. The final monster dropped another essence. YuWon picked it up and put it in his inventory pouch. The knife he had purchased from the new lackey was now coated in layers of clotted blood. YuWon turned around and asked Songchan, "How many was that?" "That was 6. It was another successful horde hunt. Counting the one he just picked up, it was a total of 7. YuWon took 5 essences from Songchan, letting him keep 1. In the subterranean dungeon, there were a lot of strong monsters. Until now, YuWon hunted those monsters by individually searching for them. They might have a higher drop rate, but he was capped by the limitation of being a lone wolf. Bring back a horde of monsters. About 10 is probably good at first, they thought. How could that be any good? But they soon realized. We can't bring back monsters fast enough for him. It was unbelievable. Songchan collected his breath, peeking over at YuWon. Just calling him strong would be an understatement. He's like a different species than me. Outside there were a few people who had become strong by being the first ones to start hunting. However, they were simply strong relative to the pack. They couldn't hold the candle to Yuan's might. What does he plan on doing with all that essence? Yuan is a bit late. Songchan asked. I'm sure she'll be back soon. Songchan and Yuan had one job, to be bait for the horde. Yuan already had 50 essences when they met him. For some reason, that wasn't enough for him, so he continued to hunt. Songchan suddenly became curious. What level are you? Level? Yuan blinked. Yes. With your rate of hunting, I'd imagine that you'd be leveling up pretty fast. Yuan shook his head. The pace of my leveling has slowed down a lot. What? Songchan got stunned by his words. I'll have to wait for the next tutorial to level up properly. Yuan shrugged as he answered. By the way, levels are personal information. Don't ask others about it, and if you're asked, don't answer. It's the same for stats. Yuan advised him to be cautious. Didn't you ask me about my constitution earlier? After hearing Yuan, Songchan mumbled. You're right. I should have just let your arm rot off. Songchan let out a nervous laugh before responding. I'll take it to heart. In this new world, information like social security and phone numbers were meaningless. The most important information about someone would be their levels and stats. Songchan realized how foolish of an act to ask and share them was. Yuan observed Songchan, who was getting ready to go gather another horde. With this, I'll be able to gather many more than I originally planned. Yuan SSI, I'm here. A voice resounded from deep within the dungeon. Suddenly, amid their break, Yuan returned with another horde of monsters. Songchan gasped as he looked at the monsters. Yuan got back up. There wasn't a lot of time left. It was time to keep grinding. He instantly charged toward the monsters to keep on grinding. The hammer in Songchan's hand crushed the subterranean snake's head. As the snake stopped squirming, Songchan shouted in joy, I killed it! He heard the level up message. He and Yuan managed to catch a subterranean snake all by themselves. While helping Yuan hunt hordes, the duo were not negligent, killing a monster here and there. They were leveling up, as per Yuan's advice. Did your level go up? Yep. You too? An essence fell out of the subterranean snake's mouth. This was their essence. It wasn't Yuan who caught the snake, but them. All done? Yuan asked. Songchan nodded his head to Yuan, who had been watching over the duo. So we can have this? Sure, you have killed it, so it's yours. Yuan picked up one of the essences on the ground. He then walked up to them and tossed it over to Yuan. Does this mean that the two of you have 50 essences now? Yuan nodded her head. They finished gathering the 50 essence that was required to pass the third tutorial. They had only managed to collect 20 before meeting Yuan. They had managed to complete what seemed like an impossible task. We are thankful to you, Yuan SSI. I would be the one thankful to both of you. Because of you, I was able to hunt 50% faster. Yuan checked the time. Only 3 hours remain until the end of 3-hour D&D tutorial. I should hurry. There wasn't a lot of time left. Once only 2 hours were remaining, the gate to the next tutorial would activate. He had to get outside before then. If you're all done, let's head on out. Both of them were happy, as they got to leave this dungeon that is infested with gigantic monsters. Yuan started walking up the stairs. So we're finally going back up. Will outside still be in utter chaos? Songchan asked nervously, walking behind Yuan. Songchan started remembering the situation above ground before they entered the subway station. He and Yuan were running away from a group that had attacked them. They had lost 2 friends in that attack, and inside the subway station, they lost another friend. Remembering those events made him afraid of facing them again. Yuan shook her head in response to Songchan's question. I bet it's become worse. Now that the third tutorial was about to come to an end, there was no reason for the chaos to calm down. Yuan stared at Yuan, who was leading the way. I'm worried for the people outside. Choi Jae-hyun checked the time. Looking over at the gate, he could see it slowly turning red. There isn't a lot of time left now. Once the gate becomes a bright, crimson red, people will be able to move on to the next stage of the tutorial. Of course, this only applied to people who met the requirements. Choi Jae-hyun had 45 mana essence orbs. He still needed 5 more to reach 50 essences. He had 2.5 hours. If he hustled and bustled, he might be able to obtain them. He even leveled up quite a bit, so hunting had gotten that much easier. However, there was no guarantee he'd obtain 5 more. That's why he came up with a plan, but Everyone else had the same thought. A lot of people had gathered around the center of the safe zone. They either observed what the others were up to from a distance, or they tried to make some awkward conservation. I'm not surprised. If they still ain't got it, this is their only option. The drop rate for essence was abysmal. You were lucky to obtain even one after fighting an entire horde of monsters. Zombies, the weakest monsters, had a drop rate of less than 1 out of 20. This mission is absolutely brutal. The mission was hard to beat just by hunting. That's why all these people were gathered here. The second the gate opened, they planned on stealing other people's essence and dashing to the next tutorial. So for now, they remain still. They don't seem like they plan on acting anytime soon. They'll probably start once the gate opens. As soon as the gate activates, steal and dash, Jaehyun thought to himself, while keeping a lookout for the group at the opposite end of the safe zone. They were the only people that were closely grouped up near the gate. The largest faction in the third tutorial. Hyun Dushik spoke. That guy. Doesn't he look like he's watching us? Jaehyun shook his head at Dushik's question. Well, it can't be helped. We're not exactly friends. We even fought them a while back. What should we do? They far outnumber us, so for now let's just watch. There's no point in fighting right now. Do you think they're also short on the essence, Hyun? Someone from the large group started walking toward Choi Jaehyun, grabbing everyone's attention. Kim Myung-hoon. He was the one leading the largest faction. He was not only large in size and a good fighter, but he was also extremely charismatic with his silver tongue. Long time, no see. What's it been, 2 days? Myung-hoon said with a bright tone. I don't think we're so friendly enough to be sharing such warm greetings, Jaehyun coldly replied. The two groups had already gone up against each other. They were pretty evenly matched in numbers back then, so it only ended as a minor incident. But things had changed, and Myung-hoon was well aware of that fact. You're still as prideful as ever, even when you know what'll happen. Jaehyun tried to keep his face stoic, watching Myung-hoon smile smugly. Nothing good could come from facing off against them right now. It was clear who was the top dog and who was the underdog. Seeing that Jaehyun was remaining silent, Myung-hoon continued. You know the position you're in, right? What position would that be? Jaehyun asked. Don't you think it'll become a bloodbath at 2 o'clock? With everyone being short on the essence. Jaehyun bit his lip at Myung-hoon's words. He had it all wrong. While some people were thoughtlessly hunting for essence, others probably gathered essence by stealing it from others. Meanwhile, Myung-hoon had thought things through far ahead of time. So he was preparing for this moment. He is a cunning bastard. Jaehyun scoped out Myung-hoon's group. Approximately 50 people. In contrast, he only had about 20 people on his side. There were also a handful of small groups that weren't associated with any faction, but it was unrealistic to expect them to be able to join forces at the last minute. How much do you guys need? Well, we have so many mouths to feed on our side and we are pretty low on essences. So we need about 700 more to fill up our requirements. That was far too large a number. If he had requested 100, Jaehyun would have given them up to avoid a confrontation, but this ruled out that option. We barely have 800 essences. It was a ridiculous request. If they surrendered 700 essence, they'd be left with basically nothing. Jaehyun was conflicted, and Myung-hoon piggybacked off of that. Just give us 400. Then we'll leave you guys alone. Yeah, we'll figure out the rest ourselves. They were threatening to take only half. However, even that was too generous a concession. Jaehyun could not even reject Myung-hoon's offer. He just dazedly looked at his evil face. It'll be a full-on confrontation if we reject his offer. Jaehyun looked at Dushik and his companions. That was when someone entered the safe zone. Sorry. Excuse me? Coming through. Breaking through the crowd, a male-female duo was heading towards the center of the safe zone. They were bold without any fear, cutting past Myung-hoon and his gang. Who are these guys? They were familiar faces. They remembered seeing them at least once, but they hadn't left a lasting impression. No, that only applied to one of them. It was a man holding a large box. He had an unforgettable face. Black hair with a short undercut, sharp jawline, and clear black eyes. The only participant to have roamed outside the safe zone in the second tutorial. It was Yuan. Yuwon's appearance silenced the crowd. Yuan walked over to the center of the safe zone and placed down a box. The first person to welcome Yuwon's return was Myung-hoon. Hey man, I haven't seen you in a few days. Where have you been? Yuwon looked over at Myung-hoon approaching him. When he locked eyes with Myung-hoon, he noticed the bloodthirst. Myung-hoon wasn't even smiling anymore, radiating hostility at Yuan. Well, you know, I had things to do. So, did you gather enough? Of course. Myung-hoon nodded his head at Yuwon's response. He honestly wasn't surprised. Yuan made his skills clear starting from the first tutorial, so Myung-hoon expected him to easily gather enough essence by hunting. How many did you collect? Myung-hoon asked. Some of Myung-hoon's companions came over. Myung-hoon looked over and saw the worry in his companions' expressions. Before Myung-hoon could finish his train of thought, Yuan flipped over his inventory pouch. This crazy punk. Countless marbles started pouring into the large box. Seeing a box get filled to the brim with essence was enough to make all the participants lose their minds. There's gotta be at least 1,000. It was a metric fuckton. It wasn't just the people who were in the safe zone who were shocked. This also caught the attention of the people who were waiting for the gate to open from afar. And one by one, the people who were keeping their distance gathered around. Myung-hoon's face turned sour. He could bear Yuan gaining attention from everyone. This punk, how did he collect so many essences? I can do this. Myung-hoon was hesitant to fight Yuan man to man. Maybe it was a fist fight, but he was well aware of how skilled Yuan was with a knife. But that was only in a one-on-one scenario. Myung-hoon had a group that numbered 50, a number that even Yuan shouldn't be able to handle. So he got even closer to Yuan. No matter how strong Yuan might be, he was still only a single individual. Not only did he possess far more essence, but it also seemed like a safer option to only fight Yuan versus Jaehyun's entire group. Wow. You got a lot. Myung-hoon was now close enough to see the crystals. And as he took another step, look closely at the floor. Yuan pointed to the ground, and Myung-hoon's eyes naturally followed. A line had appeared on the floor out of nowhere. When did this get here? The line drew a circle around Yuan. After seeing Myung-hoon stop in his tracks, Yuan looked around at the other greedy-eyed participants. You all need this, right? They were all desperate. The countless essence in the box was enough to attract the attention of all the participants, magnifying their desperation. Yuan knew their feelings very well. No one wanted to die here. I don't need it. I already have more than enough. Yuan's words made someone come forward, shouting, then I'll gladly. Yuan cut him off. But it's not free. He raised his index finger. 100 points for each essence. Yuan then pointed at the line on the floor. If you want to buy any, first ask for my permission before you enter the circle. 100 points for one. That is so expensive. Everyone started checking their points to find out if they really can afford the deal. It was quite a hefty price tag, but considering how essence wasn't even sold in the shop, Yuan was their only option. Myung-hoon shrugged his shoulders and took out his weapon. He raised his weapon at Yuan with a smirk on his face, saying, seriously, what a selfish punk. Hundreds of people can survive if only you share it with us. How ridiculous. Myung-hoon was confident in his group's strength, but he did not realize he was standing in front of a beast who could devour him anytime. He continued with his false charade and said, what are you going to do, Yuan? If I said I don't have money to give you? Myung-hoon asked. Yuan smirked at his question and said, that is a weird question you asked. I have no intention of forcing anyone to buy from me anyways. I don't care how you pay for it, but you have to pay up front. You can borrow money from someone, or you can even sell your items to the lackey. I don't care if you sell your items or your stats. As long as you can pay me in points, I'll sell you essence. Yuan was pretty serious about his reply. He showed no signs of oppression. He already knew he could kill all of them if they tried anything funny. Sell items? That's possible? People who were despairing from being short on points started whispering to each other. They had all received a set amount of points from the first and second tutorial, but it wasn't feasible to hunt the monsters in the third tutorial without spending points. Most of them were low on points, and they were just now told a way they could immediately obtain points. Myung-hoon looked behind as he witnessed his group gossiping about making a deal with Yuan. He trembled in anger. If that's the case, it would be better to steal it by force. As everyone came to the same conclusion, their eyes lit up with greed. And standing in front of them, Myung-hoon spoke. Don't make me laugh. Yuan stared at Myung-hoon, who was looking at his box full of essence. I bet you gathered that by killing and stealing it from others, yet you want us to pay for it? Do you think we're idiots who'll let you do that? But what if I didn't steal them? Yuan spoke. Nonsense. No way that's possible. I already warned you once, but it's survival of the fittest now. Did you think we would trade money for your goods? Yuan nodded his head at Myung-hoon's words. He was right. There were no laws governing the tutorial. With a sinister smile, Myung-hoon pointed at the people that surrounded Yuan. Look at all the people that'll live if you could just be selfless. Don't you think you're being too greedy? Am I wrong? Myung-hoon looked at the person sneering at him. It was the girl that came with Yuan, Juyeon. Killing and stealing? Do you think you have any right to call others out on that? Who the hell are you? Myung-hoon said in a rage. You don't remember? You asked me to join you, and when I said no, you immediately tried to kill me. Following Juyeon's accusation, Songchan came forward. If Yuan says I was someone who would do such a thing, he would have taken our essence as well. This is like the one who started accusing someone else of stinking up the room. I'm at a loss for words. Songchan continued. Everyone was staring at them. Juyeon further added, you guys don't know anything about him. It's you guys, Myung-hoon laughed. He remembered now. He didn't remember their names, but he remembered trying to recruit them because they were a party of 5. They looked like a group of friends. So what? What can you 3 do? Myung-hoon said intimidatingly as he raised his hand. The surrounding people started moving all at once. As 50 people circled closely around Yuan, Myung-hoon spoke with a smug look on his face. No matter how good he is with a knife, what can he do by himself? You guys ran for your lives, and the best you were able to do was become his sidekicks. That's funny. Myung-hoon lowered his hand and commanded, kill them all. Dozens of people started pulling out their swords and spears and charged towards Yuan. In an instant, a knife slash came. A fountain of blood erupted. Yuan cut off several heads in a single slash. Yuan got up from his spot. At that moment Yuan said, you guys crossed the line? Myung-hoon was confused as to what just happened. What in the world? He was in shock at the sight of blood spurting everywhere. It was not Yuan's blood. It was the blood of the people who were charged at Yuan. They had all been decapitated. These were people who had been wielding swords against monsters, yet they couldn't even see Yuan's movements. The only thing they saw was the cleanly sliced necks of the people that crossed the line. It was more than enough to instill fear into them. At that moment, Kim Myung-hoon remembered something Yuan said. Don't cross the line. It was what Yuan told him at the start of the third tutorial. Back then, he laughed it off as some naive nonsense, but now he realized that wasn't it. Was the line he was talking about this? He suddenly got chills up his back. Did he plan this moment back then? While Myung-hoon was lost in thought, his lackeys stopped their charge. How did he do that? You're right, Yuan said, looking at the dead people that lay on the floor. Yuan continued, it's survival of the fittest. There are no laws or rules. That's why it's so much harder to protect something than to obtain something. Yuan picked up a few essences from the box. The conditions are still the same, he announced. 100 points each. As long as you can pay for it, I'll sell you essence. You don't have to if you don't want to. I'm not going to force you to buy any. But if you cross the line when you don't intend to buy any. Yuan pointed to the corpses that littered the floor. Those who want to live, get my permission before you come inside the circle, otherwise it will be your grave. Yuan was confident he could protect his essence. Yuan activated Arc and Sword skill to tackle all the people who will come charging at him. Myung-hoon ground his teeth. How could so many people be intimidated by just a single person? He didn't want to accept it, but he was especially furious because he was also intimidated by Yuan. Myung-hoon shouted at the top of his lungs, "God damn it! What are you guys doing? Go! Kill him already!" He must have had good control over his group. The first person to follow his command was Lee Ji-hoon. Others quickly followed Ji-hoon, charging at Yuan once again. Yuan shrugged his shoulders. I guess this was inevitable. He knew something like this would happen. Everyone had gathered here to steal essence from each other, so of course there would be more people who would want to try to take it by force rather than pay for it fair and square. He needed to demonstrate it, the strength of a single individual suppressing a group. A decapitated head flew through the sky before falling to the ground. His inventory pouch perished the instant his head was cut off, and with the pouch, his dozens of essence perished as well. Myung-hoon's lackeys started hesitating. It was obvious to them that they couldn't beat Yuan. Heads dropped and rolled around the floor. Yuan's knife dripped blood everywhere, completely covering the circle and its surroundings with blood. Yuan had already killed 20 men, filling Myung-hoon with terror. How is this possible? He couldn't believe it. Yuan was slicing the heads off people while simultaneously avoiding all the attacks aimed at him. He couldn't even see Yuan swinging his knife. He was currently level 11. An individual that can beat dozens of people. He thought they only existed in shit like movies and comic books, but that was what was unfolding right in front of his eyes. I forgot what kind of world this was. In the world that Myung-hoon was accustomed to, being able to fight with his fists equated to power. He knew the power groups had before that. He knew since he was a child that no matter how strong an individual was, they couldn't beat power in numbers. However, this world was different. A world where stats, levels, items, and skills existed. It was a video game-like world. Myung-hoon subconsciously inched away from Yuan, and people stopped charging at Yuan altogether. There was no way to beat him. Even though it was just one single person, they were completely outclassed. Myung-hoon was ready to run when a thought popped up inside his head, the line. He's only killed people who entered the circle. He noticed the line that was drawn around Yuan. Though it had become faint from being covered in blood, one thing was for sure. Since the start of the fight, Yuan hadn't taken a single step outside the circle. Myung-hoon felt relieved. I'm safe. At least he hadn't crossed that line. Yuan would kill him if he did. That would mean Yuan wouldn't kill people that didn't go inside the circle. Myung-hoon looked up. Blood ran down his forehead. Feeling his forehead, he noticed there was a huge hole in the center. It almost felt like time was frozen. In the slow flow of time, Myung-hoon looked at Yuan. Yuan hadn't stepped outside of the circle. What, you thought you were safe if you stood there? The footsteps got closer and closer. Yuan looked around while smiling widely. I've memorized all of your faces. Yuan had left the circle. What happened? Myung-hoon fell to the floor. Before he lost consciousness, he managed to raise his head a little, and within his blurry vision, he saw him. He could no longer think. His body wobbled, and Yuan was suddenly inverted. The sky and the ground switched places in his vision, and the world turned white. He no longer had any strength to hold up his body. After some moments, no one was able to survive under Yuan's onslaught. There were piles of corpses gathered everywhere. The whole area was covered with blood and corpses. Several heads could be seen lying on the road. And with that, Yuan's massacre of the enemies that tried to steal his essence ended. What a mess. Yuan picked up his box and moved spots. Not minding the pool of blood around him, he crossed over it and walked right up to the gate, as if he had planned on being there from the beginning. Choi Jae-hyun couldn't believe what unfolded in front of his eyes. How is this even possible? Yuan didn't make any big movements. He simply stood in his spot, cutting down people one at a time as they entered the circle. So when he finally left the circle, the people that were attacking Yuan started fleeing instead. But it was useless. With his high dexterity stat, he caught up to them in the blink of an eye, chopping off their heads. So numbers didn't matter. Jae-hyun thought he was adjusting to this world pretty well. His base stats were high from the start, and after leveling quickly by hunting, he thought he should have been ahead of everyone else. That was a miscalculation. From the moment he thought an individual couldn't win against numbers, he had failed to grasp the essence of this world. There was no longer anyone who dared to challenge Yuan. Since he's there, I can enter the gate right after I purchase the essence. Everyone in the crowd scrambled around, anxiously observing each other. That's when Jae-hyun stepped forward. I'll buy it. Surprised, Dushik tried to stop Jae-hyun. Hyungnim, are you going to buy them? Do you even have the points? I asked the lackey earlier, and he told me he'd give me 500 points for this, Jae-hyun said while waving the weapon in his hand. It was the most expensive item he was able to buy in the shop, having paid 1,000 points for it. Despite having only used it for a few days, its value had plummeted by half. But still, Dushik tried to stop him again. But Jae-hyun interrupted him saying, "Try and think this through, Dushik. What do you think will happen if we try and kill someone here?" Dushik had a confused look at Jae-hyun's question. Frustrated, Jae-hyun let out a deep sigh before whispering, "None of the essences he has was stolen. It was all obtained by hunting." "How do you know that? How many monsters do you think he had to kill to get that strong?" Dushik went mute at Jae-hyun's question. He couldn't even fathom the sheer number of monsters that Yuan must have slaughtered the past 3 days to become that strong. It finally clicked in his brain how Yuan was able to collect so much essence. He had hunted that many monsters to raise his level so much. Besides, that guy, despite being able to, hasn't taken any of the essence from the guys he just killed. Jae-hyun stared at Yuan, who was waiting in front of the gate to conduct business. It was because of honor. If Yuan took and sold someone else's essence, that would ruin his plans. He wouldn't be trading, but thieving instead. Jae-hyun approached Yuan. Yuan didn't do a thing, as Jae-hyun held his hand out, showing that he intended to purchase essence. Jae-hyun originally thought that the tutorial was a lawless zone. However, he realized he was wrong. Even though the laws of the old world no longer existed, it was impossible for something like a truly lawless zone to exist. As long as more than 3 people were present, there were bound to be at least some unspoken laws and rules. In this world, the law is written by the strong, Jae-hyun thought, and currently, Yuan was the one calling the shots. "Please give me 7, Jae-hyun raised his hand for points exchange. Yuan nodded his head and shook hands with Jae-hyun. The system window popped up notifying you obtained 700 points. As they were exchanging points, the people in the crowd started gossiping. Right, if we buy essences we immediately move to the next tutorial. The first trade was made. Yuan grabbed 7 essences from the box and handed it to Jae-hyun. Having collected 50 essences, Jae-hyun crossed over into the gate. After that, "Me too. I want to buy it too. 7 for me. Does anyone have any spare points? I promise to pay you back in the next tutorial." The street had turned into a marketplace. While selling his essence, Yuan observed the trading between participants and the lackeys that had appeared. In the tutorial shop, there was a sell back function. It was a way to get back the points you consumed by reselling the items you were using at the shop. Then the lackeys took the items they repurchased and sold them to participants of the next tutorial. This item is a bit damaged. I'll give you 300 points for it. That item is quite unpopular, so I can only give you 200 points. What? That's completely cheating. The participants voiced their anger at the prices that the lackeys proposed. Items that were purchased for 1,000 points were only being offered 300 or 400 points now, even going as low as 200 points. If it's 100 points per stat. Wait a sec. 3 perception points. That's enough for 300 points, right? Some people even started selling their stat points. You obtained 700 points. You obtained 400 points. YuWon counted in his head as he sold off his essence. People were busy calling up lackeys to sell the items they had purchased. 100 points per stat. It was the definition of a scam. What a terrible deal. You obtained 1,100 points. Stats inherently had a higher value than points. Though there were many items and skills you could purchase from the shop, no matter how many points you had, you couldn't purchase stats with points. Yeah, sure, losing a few perception or constitution points might not seem like a big deal now, but in the long run, it was a huge loss. After climbing even a few floors of the tower, they'd realize how valuable the stat points they had lost were. It's probably better than dying here, I guess. Total points possessed, 167,400. The sales progressed smoothly to the very end. Yuan nodded his head after checking how many points he had. It was much higher than he originally anticipated. It was a combination of the points from defeating the mother worm and the sales of the essence. I thought I was only going to be able to get 100k at best by the end of the third tutorial. However, the tutorial had progressed much better than he anticipated. 160,000 points. Even inside the tower, this was quite a sum. It shouldn't have been possible to earn that many points in the tutorial. It might be possible now. Yuan got up from his spot. Hyun, who was waiting beside him, asked, "Are you finally going in?" Yuan turned his head to look at her. Beside her, Songchan was also waiting for Yuan. "Why haven't you guys left yet? We wanted to go with you." Though it was only for a day, Hyun and Songchan had been following Yuan. Yuan shook his head. It was a no-brainer. I don't have any intention of making any companions here. You don't have to consider us your companions. We're okay with being used as pawns again. And if you think we're no longer useful, you can toss us aside. Calling themselves pawns. That was no easy decision. Yuan was stunned at their answer. A smile spread on Yuan's face. It was true that hunting went much better thanks to these two. However, that didn't mean that they could walk the same path as him. There was almost no human that could walk beside Yuan. Without extraordinary talent, it was impossible to follow where Yuan was headed, let alone walk alongside him. Naturally, that applied to Hyun and Songchan. Unfortunately, this is it. I also told this to the guy that just died, but don't try and latch on to someone else. You won't last long that way. Songchan had a disappointed face after hearing that from Yuan, but they had half expected it. Still, disappointment is unavoidable when your hopes are crushed. Yuan shrugged his shoulders at the expressions on their faces. Besides, even if I wanted to go, I can't. Because I'm not going. What do you mean you're not going? Hyun and Songchan were confused. Their faces turned hearing Yuan's words. Yuan flipped over his inventory pouch. Not a single thing fell out from inside it. It's because I don't have any more essence. That's all for today. If you like the next part of this manhwa, just comment below. Thanks for watching, and please don't forget to like, subscribe and comment for getting epic content on this channel. See you next time.